Hello everybody, this is Catholic Dad, episode number 165, Why Christians Need to Be United. So I wanted to take you back in history a little bit to the year 1571. What was going on at that point in time? St. Pius V was the Pope at that point in time, and Islam was still making inroads into Europe and trying to take over the whole darn thing. Anyway, the Holy League was being called upon to tell Islam to get out, and we no longer need you there. And so essentially, 1571, under the order of Pius V, there was the Battle of Lepanto, which was essentially one of the greatest sea battles in the history of mankind. And it was when Christian Europe, the Holy League, got together and they pushed Islam out of Europe forever in terms of taking over Europe and defeating Christianity. And that was actually the last sea battle that was fought in boats that you had to row. You actually had to row the boats out and kill each other that way. Well, anyway, the whole thing was financed essentially with Don Juan of Austria and Philip II of Spain. Philip II of Spain was one of the greatest Catholic monarchs of all time. And those two guys got together with their armies and their money, and they went to Lepanto and they prayed the rosary as they went into battle, and all of Christendom was ordered to pray the rosary for a victory at Lepanto. And it was October 7th, 1571, if I remember properly. I could be wrong, but I think that's it. And that's Our Lady of Victory. It was the victory of Lepanto. Now, here's the deal, right? Christendom went and defeated Islam in the Mediterranean, and they pushed the Ottoman Empire out of Europe forever, essentially, until the last couple of years, right? But where was France at this point in time? That's the question for you. Charles IX of France was he was a great Catholic monarch, and he didn't dedicate any troops or money to the Battle of Lepanto. Well, he had his own little problem going on in France, and the Huguenots were the Huguenots were essentially the descendants of John Calvin, and they were spreading Calvinism all over France. They were about 10% of the population at that point in time. But the Huguenots, if you don't know it, they were not peasant people that essentially were alms for the poor. Huguenots were very powerful and rich, and they were making huge inroads into owning lots of things in France, and they were trying to get the Catholic monarchy ended in France, and they wanted to end Catholicism in Europe. And so they had a lot of spies and moles throughout the king's courts, and what they were trying to do, the Huguenots were trying to do at that point in time, was in the 1570s and 1560s, they were trying to get Charles IX and Philip II entangled in war, and so they were doing all these nefarious things. And why did they want to do that? Well, because they wanted to end Catholicism in Europe. And how were they going to do that? Well, they were allying themselves with Islam, and they wanted Islam to make incursions into Europe, and they knew that if Philip II of Spain and Charles IX of France could kick their butts, and they wanted to get them in a battle over, and then nobody could ever stop Islam from getting in. And once Islam got in, then they could throw over the monarchy, the Catholic monarchies, and then hopefully the Huguenots, the Calvinists, could hopefully take over or ally themselves with Islam. And that tells you something. I mean, Calvinism, I hardly think you could even call it Christianity in some ways, because they don't believe in any of the basic tenets of Christianity for the first 1,500 plus years of Christianity. I mean, they turned the whole thing on its head, preordination, or predestination, I'm sorry, and then just essentially invented a new religion, and they used the Lord's name, Jesus Christ. I think the Presbyterians flowed from there eventually. I don't really know that history, but all that being said is Charles IX was busy fighting in his own country to stop the Huguenots from trying to foment war between him and Philip II, and they were also trying to take over his court, and they were bribing people, and they had a lot of money and influence. So eventually, who was the lady that ordered it? I don't remember. But they did the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre in 1572 and essentially killed all the party heads of the Huguenots and slaughtered them dead using the king's men. And eventually they purged France of the rotten Huguenots and the rotten Calvinism for centuries on end. But what these Huguenots claimed to be Christians, they claimed to be Calvinists. And what were they busy doing? They were busy trying to destroy Catholicism and let Islam into Europe. Why do Christians need to be united? Because when Christians work together, they're far more powerful. And if they agree with each other on the basic tenets of Christianity, they should not be arguing and fighting with one another. That's why essentially why disobedience to the papacy is such a bad thing, because all sorts of people, traditional people, liberal people, they all get their own ideas about the tree of knowledge. They all want to eat that apple from the tree and establish their own heaven on earth. They all think they can get religion better than the papacy. They all think that Roman Catholicism can be perfected. And like Martin Luther was that way. He thought he could figure it out. Henry VIII was that way. John Calvin was that way. Everybody, like the traditional Catholics are that way. The Sedevacantists, they think they have it right and the Pope has it wrong. And if you keep doing that, eventually you argue with each other. And when you argue with each other, your enemies can actually overtake you, right? And that's what, like Lepanto, Our Lady of Victories, that was only because of Don Juan of Austria and Philip II of Spain. And if Charles IX was there, it would have been the slaughter fest, and there would have been, it really would have been easy to overtake the Ottoman Empire in incursions. But we were made much weaker because of the Huguenots in France. We were made much weaker because of Calvinists. We were made much weaker because of disunity. And if you think about disunity in Catholic Europe at that point in time, or Christian Europe, I guess, right? Because that was post-Reformation. Think about disunity in your own churches. Like, what are we arguing about, people? We got the sacraments, we got the Holy Eucharist. Be obedient to the church, listen to what the Pope says, and stop fighting with each other. Because if we fight with each other, Islam's going to take over. And I mean, that's not really what I mean. Secular humanism is going to take over. And we see that all across America, all across the world. It's not Christianity winning right now because we're so damn divided on so many basic tenets of the faith. All we need to do is put a look at the Pope, follow the sacraments, follow our faith with our church with regard to faith and morals, and stop trying to divide everybody along the lines of tiny little positions here and there. We need to work together. We need to be united. And this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. The victory of Lepanto, a wonderful victory. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us that we may all celebrate the virtue of obedience, and we may all flush the pride out of our own souls so that we can be united and we could fight the secular incursions in every country on the planet right now, and hopefully move toward the Lord. This is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, share with your friends, and God bless you all, and live a sacramental life and pray the daily rosary, Our Lady of Victory, everybody. God bless. And by the way, read about that. That's a wonderful battle. It's a wonderful victory, and it's an amazing little piece of history. God bless.